Anne Ruston is Australia's Shadow Sports Minister, and Anne, an inquiry motion's been tabled in the Senate. What are the concerns around the Brisbane Olympics and indeed the Victorian Commonwealth Games?
Well, I'm pleased to say that eventually yesterday it did actually get approval, and we do now have an inquiry into this infrastructure. And basically what we're saying is if the federal government will not allow us to have oversight over the expenditure of billions of dollars of taxpayers' money on Olympic, Commonwealth Games and Paralympic infrastructure, then the Parliament had its say yesterday and said, well, actually, we will have that oversight. So that's great news for Australians, that at least somebody is having put in the best interest of their hard-earned taxpayers' money under the microscope.
And we spoke about this previously, about concerns regarding the Queensland Labor government and how it was handling the Games expenditure. Was the motion moved, maybe given a little bit more impetus after they got rid of this independent body and decided a couple of government ministers would decide how the infrastructure money's spent?
Look, absolutely. The fact that the Queensland government has decided they're not even going to have any independence over the oversight, they're just going to whack a bit of a group into the Department of Premier and Cabinet, and they can have a look at it. There's no capacity for the federal government at all to have oversight what they're doing, because there's no way that we can ask questions, we can't bring them to estimates. So what we decided to do was, if they won't tell us what's going on, we'll use another mechanism by which to be able to get that information. But it's pretty shameful that the federal government would just allow a state government to walk all over them and say, well, we're going to give you billions and billions of dollars of hard-earned taxpayers' money to build this infrastructure, but don't worry about it. You don't need to know anything about it. You don't have to have any scrutiny. And I just think it's a pretty shameful indictment on the current federal government that they'll let that happen.
Now, you've got a federal government also putting money into supporting the Commonwealth Games in parts of regional Victoria as well. I gather from the terms of reference, you're wanting to make sure that taxpayers and indeed regional communities get value for money.
Look, absolutely. This is a really exciting opportunity for a Games the size of the Commonwealth Games to be focused outside of a huge metropolitan area. So it's a great opportunity for rural and regional Australia to be able to get great infrastructure built there that perhaps otherwise would never be built in their communities. But once again, we're 3 years away from the Commonwealth Games. We have got no idea what they're doing around the processing of visas, because so many people follow these games around. You need streamlining visa processes. You need to make sure, because it's in rural and regional Australia, there's going to be more issues in relation to making sure transport's in place, accommodation, not just for the athletes, but all the people that support putting on a game. There's so many things that should be underway right now, and they're not. And we're now starting to see the Games authorities coming out and questioning it. We saw on Monday Matt Carroll from the AOC expressing great concern about the lack of funding certainty for Olympic Games athletes. And then we also saw the Commonwealth Games come out on Monday and say they're very, very nervous about the lack of progress with infrastructure and planning.
And I can only gather from one of the terms of reference there might be a concern in regional Victoria with the housing shortage we're experiencing nationwide, that the Games, if we still have that shortage unaddressed by 2026, that hosting athletes could put a pinch on housing availability in places like Bendigo, Ballarat and Gippsland.
Well, the real challenge here is that if they don't actually address this housing issue, it could actually create great disruption to the Games as well as disruption to these communities. This is supposed to be a great experience for regional Victoria, and I think everybody was very supportive of the idea that we'd have a Games that was focused around a whole state instead of just around the capital city. But with that goes a different set of responsibilities, and one of which is making sure that you don't make the circumstances in that community worse. And if you've got a housing shortage, which we know is something that's happening right around Australia, and particularly rural and regional Australia, it is incumbent on governments, if they make these promises, to actually not have detrimental impacts on those communities. And that's what we're asking for, is let's get some oversight over this. And if there are likely to be some problems and challenges, let's address them now so they can be resolved, not wait until they become a problem and cause embarrassment to Australia because we haven't put on the best possible games we could have.
And I guess lastly, Anne Ruston, Shadow Sports Minister, we noted that in regional Victoria, Shepparton was sort of at the last minute thrown in. They've got some cycling events in the Commonwealth Games. Mildura was bitterly disappointed they missed out. Is there going to be an opportunity to review how the Andrews Labor government decided on which cities would actually be part of the Games?
Well, I think that's something for Dan Andrews to actually be explaining to his rural and regional communities. I mean, great decision to send it out to regional areas, but of course we know that regional areas expand to every corner of your state, and perhaps Mildura is a bit too far away from Melbourne for them to notice it.
Good point. And Rustin, I know you've got to get going. Thanks so much for helping explain just how this Senate motion and inquiry is going to progress. I look forward to the outcomes.
Thanks so much for having me.